My name is Lauren Hale. I am 35 years old, and 18 days after my husband's passing, my sister raised a champagne glass at his private memorial dinner and announced that half of his estate belonged to her. "He promised me," she said, looking directly at me. "I'm taking what belongs to me." My mother nodded as if the decision had already been made. My father leaned toward me and quietly ordered me to stop being selfish. 12 guests sat around the long table, but no one reached for a glass. Even the attorney at the far end stopped writing. My sister pushed a stack of printed messages across the table and said they proved everything. She expected me to cry, argue, or leave. That was how my family had always controlled me: provoke me in public, then use my reaction as proof that I was unreasonable. But I did none of those things. I removed a sealed black file from my bag and placed it in front of the attorney. My fingers were cold, but my voice was steady. "Please open this before anyone signs anything." He examined the numbered seal, broke it, and unfolded the document inside. After reading the first page, he looked at my sister. Then he turned to my parents. "Please don't leave," he said. "Your signatures are also in this file." My mother gripped the edge of the table. My father stopped breathing for a second. My sister's confident smile disappeared. What they did not yet understand was that the file contained far more than my husband's real will. It documented 14 months of lies and proved that this memorial dinner had never truly been about honoring him. Before I tell you what the attorney found and why my entire family regretted that toast, tell me what time it is, where you are, and where you're watching from. I want to see how far Lauren's story travels tonight. My husband's name was Daniel Hale. He was 39 when an unexpected medical emergency took him from me during an ordinary Tuesday morning meeting. There had been no long farewell, no final conversation, and no chance for either of us to say the things people always assume they will have time to say. 18 days later, I was still reaching toward his side of the bed before waking completely. I still carried my phone from room to room because part of me expected his name to appear on the screen. Daniel had built a successful commercial property consulting firm in Charlotte, but we had never lived like people who wanted others to calculate our worth. Our home in Myers Park was comfortable, his office building in Noda was valuable, and his investments had grown steadily. By the time everything was counted, his estate was worth a little under $5 million. Only 4 people outside his professional team knew that: Daniel, me, my father, and eventually my younger sister, Brooke Mercer. Brooke learned because our parents, Helen and Robert Mercer, believed every private detail in my life was family property. When Daniel and I updated our insurance 2 years earlier, my father had helped organize several documents while Daniel was traveling. Robert had spent most of his career in commercial banking, so Daniel trusted him with a limited power of attorney for one specific real estate closing. The document expired after 30 days. Daniel collected the original when he returned, but my father kept a scanned copy in his home office. At the time, neither of us thought that mattered. Brooke had always been the person my parents rushed to rescue. When her interior design company lost a major client, they called it a temporary setback. When I refused to invest in it, they called me cold. When Daniel offered to pay for an independent business consultant instead of writing her a blank check, Brooke treated the offer as an insult. 7 months before Daniel passed, my parents began asking questions that sounded casual until I considered them together. My mother wanted to know whether our home would bypass probate. My father asked if Daniel's office building was owned personally or through his company. Brooke joked that Daniel should remember who had helped inspire his early projects when he wrote his will. Daniel heard that last comment during a Sunday dinner. He did not laugh. On the drive home, he turned his wedding ring slowly around his finger, something he only did when he was worried. If Brooke or your parents ever make a financial claim when I'm not able to answer for myself, there's a contingency file in our safe deposit box. He told me, "Don't open it. Give it directly to Nathan Cole." Nathan was Daniel's estate attorney. I asked Daniel what was in the file, but he said he was still giving my family an opportunity to correct something privately. I assumed it concerned another loan request. Daniel asked me to trust him. And because he had never used secrecy as a weapon against me, I did. The morning after Daniel's funeral, Brooke came to my house carrying coffee I had not requested. She walked past the sympathy cards and asked when Nathan expected the estate funds to become available. My mother called later and asked whether Daniel had left special instructions for family. My father offered to take temporary control of Daniel's business accounts so I would not feel overwhelmed. I declined each offer. Their voices remained gentle, but their questions felt like hands testing a locked door. Brooke invited me to the private memorial dinner 4 days later. She said the funeral had been too formal and that Daniel deserved an evening filled with personal memories. She had reserved a private dining room near Myers Park and invited close relatives, 2 people from Daniel's company, our parents' pastor, and Nathan. I later learned that Brooke had specifically told Nathan she possessed written proof of a promise Daniel had made and wanted him present to guide the family toward a peaceful agreement. Nathan had agreed to explain the probate process, not to negotiate over dinner. Before leaving home that evening, I went to the bank and retrieved the sealed file Daniel had described. The numbered security strip was intact. His handwriting appeared across the front. To be delivered unopened to Nathan Cole if a claim is made by Brooke, Helen, or Robert Mercer. At the dinner, Brooke placed a leather memorial book beside my plate and encouraged me to sign it before the meal began. Several typed pages had been inserted behind the guest messages, but she kept turning the book back toward the signature page whenever I tried to examine them. I closed it without signing. That was the first moment her smile slipped. For nearly an hour, the dinner appeared sincere. Brooke told a harmless story about Daniel helping redesign her first office. My mother described him as the man who had held our family together. My father praised his generosity. Their words sounded beautiful until Brooke stood for the final toast. Daniel believed wealth should remain with the people who helped him build it, she said. Then she produced printed messages and claimed he had promised her half his estate in return for her creative contributions to several properties. He planned to change his will, she announced. His death happened before the paperwork was completed, but a promise is still a promise. My mother placed her hand over Brooke's. Your sister is already receiving more than enough, Lauren. Family comes first. My father's voice was lower and harder. Do not embarrass us by fighting this. Brooke slid a proposed family settlement toward me. The amount she demanded was $2.3 million. She wanted Daniel's office building, half the investment accounts, and reimbursement for what she described as unpaid consulting work. Nathan immediately said an alleged oral promise did not transfer estate property. Brooke countered that my parents were witnesses and that a public dispute would damage Daniel's reputation. That was when I understood the dinner's real purpose. They wanted grief, witnesses, social pressure, and a signature before I had enough strength to resist. I reached into my bag and removed Daniel's sealed file. Nathan did not tear into the file dramatically. He checked the number on the seal, photographed it, recorded the time, and asked whether I had opened or altered it. When I said no, he asked everyone to remain quiet. Brooke tried to continue her toast, but Nathan raised one hand. If this is what I believe it is, nothing should be discussed until I confirm the contents. He broke the seal and removed 3 separate packets. The first was an original will signed 9 weeks before Daniel's passing. The second contained loan and property records. The third was labeled Digital Evidence Index. The will had been executed in Nathan's office before 2 independent witnesses and accompanied by a self-proving affidavit. Nathan recognized the witnesses, the paper, and Daniel's initials. He explained that Daniel had sent him an encrypted working copy, but had chosen to keep the executed original inside the contingency file. It revoked every earlier will and left our home, his investment accounts, and his controlling interest in Hale Commercial to me. Specific gifts were reserved for several longtime employees and an educational fund Daniel had supported for years. Brooke received nothing. Neither did my parents. Nathan asked my permission before reading the only paragraph that directly concerned them. I nodded. He read it without changing his tone. I have intentionally made no provision for Brooke Mercer, Helen Mercer, or Robert Mercer. This omission is deliberate and reflects unauthorized financial acts, false representations, and attempts to pressure me into assuming obligations I did not create. Brooke pushed back from the table. That isn't real. Lauren made him sign it when he was sick. Nathan looked at her. I supervised the execution. Daniel was not sick, impaired, or accompanied by Lauren. He also completed a recorded capacity assessment because he anticipated that someone might challenge this document. My father said Daniel must have misunderstood a family business arrangement. My mother insisted there had been no unauthorized act. Nathan placed the will aside and opened the second packet. That was when he told them not to leave because their signatures were inside. The first document was a deed of trust securing an $840,000 private loan against Daniel's NODA office building. The borrower was listed as a company controlled by Brooke. Daniel's supposed authorization appeared beneath an altered version of the limited power of attorney he had once given my father. The original power covered one named transaction and expired almost 2 years earlier. In the version submitted to the private lender, the property schedule had been replaced, the expiration date had been removed, and Daniel's signature had been copied from the old closing file. The lender had not relied on that document alone. My father had signed a sworn declaration claiming Daniel personally approved the new loan. My mother had signed a separate affidavit stating she witnessed Daniel confirm Brooke's authority. Both of them had also signed personal guarantees promising to repay the debt if Daniel's estate rejected it. Their signatures were genuine. Nathan had already compared them with verified banking records before Daniel placed the documents in the file. Only $610,000 of the loan had been released before Daniel discovered the lien during a refinancing review. Nearly $400,000 had gone to Brooke's failing company. The remainder had paid off my parents' home equity line, club dues, overdue taxes, and several personal credit cards. Daniel had immediately disputed the lien and frozen the undisbursed balance. Instead of reporting my family at once, he gave them 30 days to return what remained, disclose where the money had gone, and cooperate with the lender. He did not tell me because he knew I would blame myself for bringing them into his life. My father's face changed first. His shock gave way to calculation. That was a bridge loan, he said. Daniel knew about it. Then why did you need an altered authorization? Nathan asked. Robert looked at Brooke. My mother whispered that she had signed without reading. Brooke said the documents had been prepared by a finance broker and that everyone was confused. Their explanations contradicted one another within seconds. I stared at my parents' signatures and remembered the day after the funeral when my father had offered to manage Daniel's accounts. I had believed he was protecting me. In reality, he had been trying to discover whether Daniel had left records of the debt. My mother's questions about probate had not been concern. She wanted to know how long they had before the lender pursued the guarantees. Brooke tried one final argument. She claimed Daniel had agreed to forgive the loan and compensate her through his estate. She lifted the printed messages she had brought and shook them toward Nathan. These prove he changed his mind. Nathan opened the third packet. Daniel expected you to say that. Brooke's evidence appeared convincing at first glance. The printed conversations used Daniel's photograph and included phrases that sounded like him. One message read, "Lauren will never understand what you contributed. I'll make sure half goes to you." Another promised that the NODA building would eventually belong to Brooke. Dates ran across 4 months, ending 3 days before Daniel passed. Nathan did not declare them false merely because the will contradicted them. He explained that Daniel had hired a licensed digital forensic examiner after Brooke sent him the same screenshots during their dispute. The examiner had made a legally preserved copy of Daniel's phone, computer, company email account, and cloud backups. None of Brooks' messages appeared on any device or server Daniel controlled. The account shown in Brooks' screenshots was not Daniel's private email. It used a domain containing one additional letter, nearly invisible in small print. The false account had been created 11 days before the first alleged conversation. Its recovery number belonged to a prepaid phone service purchased with Brooks' company debit card. Logan Records placed repeated access at my parents' South Park address. The virtual number used for the supposed text messages had been paid for through the same account. Nathan showed only enough of the forensic summary to establish those facts. He refused to display private financial information or read the entire report before the guests. "This is not a courtroom," he said. "I will not turn confidential evidence into dinner entertainment." But the material presented tonight appears to be part of the conduct Daniel documented. Brooke began crying. The tears looked real, which made them harder to dismiss. She said her company had been weeks from success and that Daniel had humiliated her by freezing the loan. She claimed she fabricated the messages only because he had already promised to help and then abandoned her. My father immediately changed his defense. He said Brooke had manipulated him. My mother blamed my father for putting papers in front of her while she was distracted. 3 people who had arrived as a united family began cutting one another loose before the appetizers had been cleared. For one dangerous second, I almost stopped Nathan. My mother looked smaller than I had ever seen her. My father's hands were trembling. Brooke's mascara had streaked beneath her eyes. I had spent most of my life believing that their distress was my responsibility. When Brooke failed, I was expected to contribute. When my parents overspent, I was expected to help quietly. When they insulted me, I was expected to forgive quickly so holiday dinners would remain comfortable. My thumb touched Daniel's wedding ring, which I wore on a chain beneath my dress. I remembered the last Sunday dinner we had attended together. My parents had praised Brooke's newest plan while dismissing Daniel's concerns. Later, in the car, he told me, "You keep buying peace from people who never stop raising the price." At the time, I had defended them. Sitting at that memorial table, I finally understood what he had been trying to tell me. My mother reached for my wrist. "Lauren, we made mistakes. But you can fix this without destroying the family. You have the estate. You can pay the lender, give Brooke the building, and let this end." Her choice of words settled something inside me. She had not apologized for deceiving Daniel or using his property. She was asking me to purchase their escape. I pulled my hand away. "Nathan, continue." Brooke's expression hardened. "If you do this, everyone will know what kind of person you are." For years, that threat would have worked. Being called selfish by my family had always felt like a verdict. But if mercy only teaches people that betrayal has no cost, is it still mercy? Nathan turned to the evidence index. Daniel's forensic examiner had recovered deleted drafts of the false messages from a shared laptop at my parents' house. The drafts showed edits to make Daniel sound warmer and more secretive. My mother had suggested replacing the word payment with inheritance because, in her words, it sounded less like a debt. My father had corrected the amount Brooke should demand so that it would cover the loan, interest, and their personal guarantees. The room became completely still. My mother claimed she had been discussing a different document. Nathan pointed to the attached screenshots and matching timestamps. My father told him the information could not be used without proper authorization. Nathan replied that Daniel owned the records sent to him and had obtained the forensic analysis while alive. Whether every item would ultimately be admissible was a question for the court, but their existence could not be erased by an objection at dinner. Brooke abruptly stood. "This is over. We're leaving." Nathan did not pretend he had authority to detain her. "You are free to go," he said. "Leaving will not remove your signatures, the lender's records, or the personal guarantees." Brooke remained beside her chair. She had come expecting me to surrender publicly. Walking out now would look like an admission. My father lowered himself back into his seat. My mother followed. That was when I noticed the leather memorial book again. A typed footer was visible beneath the final page. Family Settlement and Release. I opened it and found 4 pages hidden behind the guest signatures. The first page authorized payment of memorial expenses. The later pages acknowledged Brooke's interest in Daniel's estate, waived my right to challenge the disputed loan, and directed the executor to satisfy it using estate assets. My parents had already signed as witnesses. Brooke had not merely invited me to dinner hoping I would feel guilty. She had prepared a legal trap and disguised it as a memorial guest book. I placed the hidden agreement in front of Nathan. Unlike Daniel's file, this discovery belonged entirely to me. Brooke had spent the evening directing my attention toward her speech and manufactured messages. She had assumed grief would make me careless enough to sign wherever she pointed. Nathan photographed each page and slid the book into an empty document sleeve. My father insisted the agreement was only a draft. My mother said Brooke had told them it concerned dinner expenses. Brooke accused me of inventing sinister motives because I could not accept how close she and Daniel had supposedly been. Nathan asked whether I wanted to end the meeting. I told him I wanted to know everything Daniel had prepared. He looked toward the 2 employees, the pastor, and the extended relatives still seated around the table. Then he explained that the next item contained private statements relevant to anticipated litigation. The guests were asked to leave, and most did so quickly. No one whispered encouragement to my family on the way out. One of Daniel's employees paused beside me and placed a hand briefly on my shoulder, but she did not offer to solve anything. This was my decision. When the doors closed, only Brooke, my parents, Nathan, and I remained. Nathan told us that the final evidence was not inside the sealed file. 6 weeks before his passing, Daniel had sent Nathan an encrypted audio recording with written instructions. It could be disclosed to me if Brooke or my parents asserted a financial claim against his property. Daniel had participated in the recorded conversation, and his legal team had reviewed how it was obtained before preserving it. Nathan placed his phone on the table and played the recording. Daniel's voice filled the room. Hearing it without warning felt like losing him again for half a second. Then I heard my father speaking in the background. The conversation had taken place in my parents' den. Daniel identified the altered authorization, the $10,000 already released, and the false affidavits. He told them the lien had to be withdrawn and the money returned. Brooke did not deny creating the documents. She called the money an advance on what Daniel would owe her after his company completed a major acquisition. "You never worked for my company," Daniel said. "I introduced you to designers and attended project dinners," Brooke replied. "You used my ideas. I paid every vendor you recommended. You are not entitled to my building." My father interrupted. "You have a $22 million acquisition under review. You are not going to invite a fraud investigation into your own records." Then Brooke described the real threat. During a short vendor project, she had retained login access to an old accounting portal. She used it to create altered ledgers suggesting Daniel had diverted company funds into personal accounts. The files were false, but sending them anonymously to the acquisition partner could delay the transaction for months and destroy confidence in his company. Daniel's voice remained calm. "You created evidence to make me look guilty." "I created leverage," Brooke said. "Forgive the loan, add me to your estate plan, and the leverage disappears." My mother spoke next. Her words hurt more than Brooke's. "Lauren never needs to know. She will only blame herself, and if you force her to choose between you and us, you may not like her decision." They had used my love for them as a threat against my husband. They believed Daniel would surrender because exposing them might break me. Worse, they believed I would choose the people deceiving me over the man trying to protect me. Daniel gave them 7 days to retract the lien and disclose every altered record. My father responded that no court battle would remain private. Brooke said she could produce messages proving Daniel had promised her an ownership stake. My mother offered to support Brooke's account publicly. The recording ended with Daniel saying, "I am giving you one opportunity to tell Lauren yourselves. If you refuse, the documents go to counsel." They never told me. Daniel passed before their deadline expired. Brooke's tears had stopped. "He recorded us because he wanted to destroy us," she said. "No," I replied. He recorded you because you were already trying to destroy him. Nathan explained why the real will mattered beyond inheritance. It expressly prohibited the estate from paying any obligation created through altered authority or false representation. Brooks' proposed settlement would have reversed that protection by persuading me to ratify the disputed debt. If I had signed the memorial book, the lender could have argued that the estate voluntarily accepted the obligation. Brooke would then use her share of the estate to cover part of the loan, while my parents escaped enforcement of their guarantees. My father's composure finally broke. If the estate refuses the debt, the lender will come after us. Nathan did not soften the answer. You signed personal guarantees. You also signed statements asserting that Daniel approved the transaction. If those statements were knowingly false, the lender and title insurer may pursue you independently. My mother turned toward Brooke. You said Lauren would sign. You said the estate would pay everything. That one sentence destroyed their final claim of innocence. Nathan stopped the recording on his phone, but I asked him to write down exactly what she had said. Brooke stared at me with open hatred. You have millions. They could lose their home, and you would let that happen. I closed Daniel's file and placed my hand over it. I didn't use their home to guarantee your lie. They did. I stood, thanked Nathan, and walked out of my husband's memorial before dessert was served. Behind me, my family was no longer discussing Daniel, grief, or fairness. They were arguing over which one of them would pay first. The next morning, I authorized Nathan to submit the original will for probate and preserve every item connected to the dinner. We provided the lender and title insurer with the altered power of attorney, the sworn affidavits, the forensic report, the recording, and the settlement pages hidden inside the memorial book. I did not post the recording online or send it to my parents' friends. I did not need to create a public spectacle. Court filings, financial records, and their own signatures would do what anger never could. Brooke challenged the will 4 weeks later. She claimed Daniel lacked capacity and that I had isolated him from the family. Nathan responded with the independent witnesses, Daniel's recorded capacity assessment, appointment records, and emails showing that I had not attended the signing. Brooke withdrew the challenge when her attorney warned that continuing could expose her to sanctions and additional discovery. She then demanded a private settlement. Her proposal was simple. I would authorize the estate to pay $420,000 toward the disputed debt, allow my parents to sell their house without a judgment attached, and agree not to cooperate with investigators. In return, Brooke would abandon every claim to Daniel's estate. I rejected it. The probate court admitted Daniel's will. The estate retained our home, the investment accounts, and Daniel's interest in the office building. A negotiated agreement between the estate, the lender, and the title insurer removed the fraudulent lien from Daniel's property. Once the security against his building disappeared, the unpaid balance shifted toward the people who had received the money and the guarantors who had promised repayment. Brooks' company collapsed first. Financial records showed she had used the loan for far more than legitimate business expenses. She had paid personal rent, leased a luxury vehicle, funded expensive promotional events, and transferred money to our parents. Her remaining contracts were canceled after the civil filings became public. The lender obtained a substantial judgment against her company, and a court-appointed receiver sold its furniture, equipment, and client list. Her vehicle was returned, her uptown apartment lease ended, and she moved into a small studio outside the city. The criminal investigation lasted longer. Brooke eventually entered a negotiated plea involving 2 fraud-related charges and the use of altered financial documents. She received a suspended sentence, 5 years of supervised probation, and a restitution order that would follow her long after the attention faded. She was required to report income, obtain approval for certain financial accounts, and surrender any proceeds from the dissolved company. The judgment also made it nearly impossible for her to obtain conventional business financing. The woman who had toasted to taking half of Daniel's estate began having part of every paycheck redirected toward restitution. My parents tried to present themselves as elderly victims of Brooke's manipulation. The recording prevented that. My father had corrected the amount she should demand. My mother had helped edit the fabricated messages. Both had signed false declarations, and both had benefited financially. Their attorneys secured less serious plea arrangements than Brooke's, but they still received probation, financial penalties, and joint civil liability for a large portion of the remaining debt. My father had built his identity around being a respected former banker. Once the case became public, two companies ended consulting relationships with him. A regional finance association removed him from an honorary committee. The golf club where he had spent 20 years entertaining clients suspended his membership after he failed to disclose the pending judgment during its annual review. My mother had served as treasurer of a church charitable committee and spoke often about integrity. The church asked her to step down when the court records showed she had signed a false financial affidavit and accepted money from the loan. Some friends stopped calling. Others remained polite but no longer invited my parents into the rooms where reputation mattered. The heaviest consequence was their South Park house. My parents had purchased it when I was in college and treated the address like proof that they had succeeded. Every family gathering revolved around that house. My mother described each renovation in detail. My father boasted that he would never carry another mortgage. Yet he had used the house in his personal guarantee, believing Daniel's estate would cover the debt before anyone looked closely. 9 months after the memorial, the lender prepared to enforce its judgment. My parents could either face a court-supervised sale or sell the property themselves and apply the equity toward restitution and settlement costs. They chose a private sale, hoping to preserve some dignity. The listing photos appeared online with the rooms already stripped of family photographs. The dining table where they had defended Brooke for years was gone. Before the closing, we attended one court-ordered mediation. It was the first time I had seen all three of them since the memorial. Brooke wore an inexpensive gray suit and carried a folder prepared by her attorney. My father looked older. My mother stared at Daniel's ring around my neck. The mediator gave them time to present a final request. My father said the family had made terrible decisions under pressure. Brooke said Daniel had overreacted to a business misunderstanding. My mother spoke directly to me. "We are going to lose our home," she said. "Whatever happened, we are still your parents. You can stop this." I felt the old pressure return, the expectation that I should absorb the cost because I was the only person in the room capable of paying it. But I also noticed that none of them had said Daniel's name with regret. They regretted the house, the judgment, and the public records. They did not regret what they had done until it became expensive. "You didn't lose your home because I opened a file," I told them. "You lost it when you signed documents you knew were false." My father blamed Brooke. Brooke accused him of designing the loan structure. My mother said she had only followed them because she wanted to keep the family together. Their attorneys struggled to quiet them, but the accusations continued. The unity they had displayed at the memorial was gone because it had never been loyalty. It had been shared self-interest. I refused their proposed payment arrangement and signed only the settlement terms already approved by the lender and title insurer. My parents sold the house 6 weeks later. Most of the equity went toward the debt, legal expenses, and restitution. They moved into a 2-bedroom rental near Gastonia. My father sold his second car and several pieces from his watch collection. My mother held an estate sale for furniture she had once refused to let anyone touch. Brooke attempted to contact me repeatedly. Her first messages were angry. Then they became apologetic. Finally, they became practical. She asked me to tell the probation officer that Daniel had intended to help her. She wanted a statement that might reduce her restitution obligations. I responded once through Nathan. I would provide truthful information if legally required, but I would not rewrite Daniel's intentions to make her consequences easier. My parents left 47 calls during the month of their move. I listened to one voicemail. My mother said, "I hope you are happy now." I was not happy that they were losing their home. I was not celebrating Brooke's probation. Revenge did not feel like fireworks or applause. It felt like putting down a burden I had carried for years and realizing it had never belonged to me. Their suffering was not something I had created. It was the delayed invoice for choices they believed someone else would always pay for. 14 months after the memorial, Daniel's estate closed. Our home remained mine. His company shares transferred according to the will, and the gifts he had planned for longtime employees were fully funded. I used part of my inheritance to establish the Daniel Hale Legal Navigation Grant through a local nonprofit. It helps surviving spouses obtain early financial and legal guidance when relatives, creditors, or business partners attempt to exploit confusion after a loss. I did not create it to make my family look worse. I created it because knowledge would have protected me sooner than obedience ever did. A mutual acquaintance eventually told me my parents were still living in their rental and rarely attended social events. My father had taken part-time bookkeeping work. My mother no longer served on community boards. Brooke was working in an administrative position, with a portion of her wages directed toward restitution. The acquaintance waited as if expecting me to ask for more details. I thanked her and ended the conversation. On the anniversary of Daniel's passing, my mother called from an unfamiliar number. Her voicemail said, "Time should have taught me that family deserve forgiveness." She did not mention the forged authorization, the false messages, or the memorial agreement hidden behind a page they expected me to sign. She only said they had suffered enough. I deleted the message. Daniel's sealed file eventually moved from Nathan's evidence cabinet into permanent estate records. I kept one thing from it: a short handwritten note Daniel had placed behind the will. It said, "Lauren, protecting people from the consequences of their choices is not the same as loving them." For most of my life, my parents and Brooke had trained me to believe that saying no was cruelty. Daniel's real will gave me property, security, and proof of their deception. But the most valuable thing it returned was my ability to trust my own judgment. My sister stood at my husband's memorial and announced that she was taking what belonged to her. In the end, she received exactly what belonged to her: the debt she created, the judgment she earned, and the consequences she expected me to carry. If the people calling your boundaries selfish were the same people profiting from your silence, would you forgive them, or finally believe what their signatures proved?
Thank you for staying with this emotional journey from beginning to end. Everything in this video is fictional and intended only for entertainment, reflection, and educational storytelling. We hope it reminds you that some people will never understand the damage they caused, no matter how many times you explain it. At that point, your healing matters more than their understanding.